Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor.
Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send a message to others that they are not alone.
Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, and find some research information about PTSD. And if you can, look good while supporting Cracked Armor by buying some gear.
(10-9). Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 17 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. I'd like to take a moment to do some shout-outs to some listeners across the globe, to those in Atlanta, Georgia, in Frankfurt am Main und an der Oder in Deutschland, and in Tremor, Waterford, Ireland. Thank you, Danke, Sluncha. Really appreciate the support. Been doing some thinking lately about the mandate of the show. I was asked last week about the mandate. What is the mandate? What is it you're trying to do? And I kind of always say I'm wanting to stand up, speak out, be a voice for those who, for whatever reason, cannot use their voice, be it fear of repercussions, be it embarrassment, be it still trying to get to the point of acceptance, whatever. But that's not really a mandate, I guess, because what is it I'm trying to achieve? And that got me wondering about the purpose of this podcast. Like, what is the point of the show? What is the point? That's when I came to the conclusion that I believe this podcast is essentially an audio peer support group. Hear me out. I mean, a peer support group, people get together who have common struggles. So let's talk about it being a PTSD support group. Okay. You'd be in a room, you sit down, different people would talk. You could sit there and attend 10 meetings and never say a damn word. Nothing. You're still part of that peer support group, and you're still there listening, and you're still there learning. You're learning about what's worked for other people, what hasn't worked for them, their pitfalls, their heights, their symptoms, and their coping mechanisms. But you're there, and you're part of that peer support group. And the show every week starts off with me giving a brief introduction, most times sharing something about myself, but every now and again I kind of go off on a different friggin' rampage. And then a guest joins. And one question is put to that guest every episode. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey. And that gives the opportunity for that guest to talk about their story. I always say to the guests before I hit the record button, this is your words, your story, your journey. Whatever you want to say, I am just going to follow you on that path. If you want to bring up things that we've discussed before, great. If you don't, great. I am just following where you're taking me. And so we explore the story of one of our peers. The following week, another guest comes on. And again, please introduce yourself, tell us about your journey. And we go through it. Now, you listeners out there, if you would like to stand up and tell your story, to speak even briefly, we don't have to record an entire episode. We could record a few minutes. If you want the opportunity to introduce yourself and just say, hey, I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful to listen. We can do that. Send me a recording of you just saying it on your phone. Introduce yourself. Tell us something about you and whatever you want to say. Keep it under a couple of minutes. Send it through. I'll be happy to share it. Because ultimately, that's what I see. This podcast is a peer support group. And as Dr. Shauna Springer has said, when we connect, we survive. And that's a reality. That is a fucking reality. Everyone needs to understand. You're not doing this alone. And if you are, then you need to start reaching out, because when you're alone, that's typically when you're fucking dangerous. That's when you start thinking bad things. That's when you start recalling those traumatic experiences. That's when shit can hit the fan. So again, when we connect, we survive. And so on this show, I truly believe that we are connecting. And by connecting, I truly believe that we are surviving. And we are codependent. The guests come on the show wanting to share their story. Some of the reasons is it's part of their therapy. Some reasons they just want to get the word out there. Some reasons they want to help other people. They want to help those who are struggling. But for whatever reason, they're connecting. They're opening themselves up to vulnerability and connecting. And you, by even downloading and listening to this, are connecting. The past few weeks, I've been speaking with several brothers and sisters who have gotten to the point of thinking about it, considering it, planning it, and even getting to the point that they're ready to pull the trigger. Please don't. Every single one of those brothers and sisters I've spoken to told me they are now glad they didn't do it. Please do not extinguish your own light. There truly is post-traumatic growth. I believe that I'm living it. And I believe you either are living it and just don't realize it, or that you just need to realize that you can too live it. And when I talk about post-traumatic growth, which I mentioned last week, part of that is even this podcast. Because 5 months ago, this didn't exist. I wasn't there. I was somewhere else. I mean, fucking mentally, I was somewhere else. Geographically, I was oftentimes somewhere else. And I was still struggling in silence. And so part of my growth has been sharing my story, putting myself out there, being transparent, and connecting with other people. People who want to join the show, people who send me messages, emails, texts, phone calls, and people who download it and listen. It's post-traumatic growth. There are ways you can grow. There are ways that you can actually be better because of your PTSD. Just know that you have no reason to ever feel shame, embarrassment, guilt, or fear. You are injured, not destroyed, injured. The scars you bear are earned from courage and service. Don't hide them, but rather be proud to speak of those scars. I am now to a point that I am proud. And I genuinely don't give a fuck about what others may feel. Especially those I've tried to impress who are actually part of the bigger problem. Kind of see it as those who aren't beside me, just in my way. And I want to be able to move forward, and I want things out of my way. That's my reality. I still work with it every day. Don't think that I'm walking around constantly with a fucking smile on my face, always happy, never getting depressed. Horseshit. Absolute horseshit. Yeah, I do. I struggle all the time. I go through a fucking roller coaster, cataclysmic goddamn ride of emotions pretty much every day. But I also try to look at the silver lining. And again, this show, I am sitting here talking. I am alone and I am fucking talking to myself. But all of a sudden, there's a bunch of people that hear it. And then people reach out and connect. And people feel that they're not alone. And people realize there is someone out there who truly cares. This podcast is essentially a peer support group. I am beside you. Make sure you remember that. I am right beside you. Let's take a quick break. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at Papa Tango Sierra Delta Podcast @gmail.com. Cheers. We are back from the break. Thank you very much for sticking around to hear the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. On today's episode, I would like to introduce Navy veteran Don McIlmoyle. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So I think people are going to learn quite a bit today about, well, you know what, a lot of things, because your story goes back a ways and was captured by media in the past, and there's a lot of things that's happened since. So, Don, please tell us about you and your journey.
I joined the military I was 18 when I joined. I turned 19 in basic training. When I joined, I had this dream in my head that I was going to be a part of something bigger, and eventually I was going to be a doctor. I know I joined as a naval signalman, but I had this idea that the recruiter gave me this idea that I could remuster at any time. So I could eventually get into being a medic, and then I could take night courses or something at university, and I could get enough courses that they would pay for me to go be a doctor, and then I would continue serving. This was my plan I made at 18.
It sounds good.
It did not work out the way I thought it would. But I have to say, after all of these years, I did manifest all of my dreams because I became a part of something bigger, and we'll get into that. And I also have accumulated enough knowledge, and like the post that you put with Dr. Glenn Doyle, trauma survivors actually have a shit ton of knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And all I want to do is put it to use to see other people grow.
I love it. We're off to a wicked start already, Don. I love the attitude, and I think, again, there's a lot people are going to learn from you, so keep trucking.
When I left the military, I had only been in for 23 months. I had been horribly abused. I actually got charged for reporting my sexual assault.
What?
And I could not understand. So when I got home, I was 21 years old. I felt like a failure, and I was in this 5-year-old mindset because I didn't know I had parts. What it was is I was like, why? I was like, why? So I kept calling NDHQ and asking questions.
Makes perfect sense.
And I was like, if I got released straight from the psych ward, why did you release me unadvantageously employable?
Absolutely.
And that's one lady I talked to, she finally heard my story, and she's like, oh no, that wasn't right. And she got my release changed to a medical one so that I could start fighting for a pension. Well, once she did that, she sent me on this other what happened must have been really wrong, because she got that done quickly, right?
Absolutely.
And so there was this gut instinct within me that I had been horribly wronged, but I was not the only one. I had seen things happen. I had heard things happen. And I had also had because I was on the female floor, I had had some girls come to me and say, if anything ever happens to me, I'm not saying a word.
Wow.
And I carried that on my shoulders. I thought because I told and then I got made an example of, that now other girls aren't going to tell what happens to them. So I felt horrible in more ways than just one. Right? I'd been traumatized. I'd been re-traumatized by being charged. And now I'm carrying the weight of the fact that some people aren't going to tell because of me.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah, it was like a survivor guilt in a way, too. It's just, I had a complete moral injury, a breakdown of I didn't know what was right or wrong anymore. And I kept seeking. I went back to high school to get in Ontario, you get your grade 13 credits, they're OAC.
Right.
And I didn't have enough to go to university, and I was only 21. So I got my 2 English credits. But my creative writing teacher said, why don't you write about the military? And I'm like, well, that is not going to be pretty. But he encouraged me to do it. And I ended up writing 100 pages of what had happened to me.
Wow.
Well, he was floored. And we had this lady come in to speak to our class, and she was a writer. And he said, do you mind? And I was like, no, I guess, this isn't, because he kept telling me this is an important story you need to share. And this, I was only 21. I had had my first son. but I was like in high school still. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do with it. She read it and was like, oh my. And she called June Colwood, who was an activist in Ontario. And she called the Globe and Mail, and they sent reporters to my house and everything, but it turned out to be too controversial. So this is like 1995, 96. They went to Ottawa, looked at all my records, but then they said, this is too controversial of a subject. So I felt defeated. I'm like, it's not going to get out there. I did not know what to do with my story. And then in 97, I had another son. So I was married for the first time. I had 3 of those horrible things.
I'm lost on this, and I know it's the mid 90s, and of course I remember it well, but it absolutely kills me. It guts me that you were sexually assaulted, then you're charged, then you're booted out for what is logged as the incorrect reason. You have to fight to be medically discharged, and then you're told that your story, which is 100% hand to God truth, is too controversial to share. I mean, that just had to be, I mean, that's just a smack in the nether region if I've ever heard it. I mean, that's just brutal.
Yeah. But I have this fight inside of me that I don't know. I'm pretty sure my grandfather was a boxer back in the day, so it must come from him.
Nice.
I couldn't give up. So now I'm in the pension fighting process because I did apply for a pension with Veterans Affairs. I got my pension when I was 9 months pregnant. So I'm pretty sure that they just felt sorry for me, the board, because I was at my last appeal.
Wow.
And I showed up 9 months pregnant, crying, telling them this story. So they gave me like the minimum amount they could give me.
Brutal. Jesus.
I ended up getting like 3/5. They said they were not at fault completely because it happened in the barracks and I was not on duty.
What the fuck?
But because of what happened in the barracks and because they took me to their room, I was charged.
Oh my God.
So, there's like complete hypocritical laws. Just everything that the military did, then Veterans Affairs says, oh, that's not applicable. So there's a lot of controversy in the different things. It is getting better since the lawsuit. Now they have to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Jesus, that's the least they should do.
And it doesn't have to be service related.
No. Wow.
But it took a long time to get to this stage. That was 97 because then I was doing my appeal, I think, to get it up from 20. And my lawyer called me and said he had found another girl that was in the exact same situation as me. And he said, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I think you guys need to talk.
Yeah.
So we ended up talking and we had extremely similar stories. And we're like, do they have an invisible handbook on how to deal with this? Because this is not right. So she ended up calling Maclean's and talking to them and told them about me. And they called me that day and they sent a reporter who came, and she actually took my 100-page story with her to show to the reporter, Jane O'Hara.
Wow.
And Jane O'Hara actually took lines out of my story and put them in the May 25th, 1998 Maclean's article where I'm on the cover.
Wow.
And because of that, they found there was 12 brave women and myself that came forward and told their stories of sexual assault, misconduct, and harassment.
Unbelievable.
And it was a beginning.
Wow.
There were 4 articles from May to July, I believe, on the subject. And then there was another one in December. And then it was just forgotten for 16 years.
Oh my Jesus.
I wanted to make a difference and that it would change, that it would stop happening, because all of those people that told me that they wouldn't report, then maybe it would stop happening. And then I ended up getting a lot of harassment when I did that. It was 1998. So they only had Yahoo chat rooms. And I had started a 1-800 number. I had this idea that I was going to get people calling me and I was going to find different people from different provinces and hook them up. So I had this idea of this PTSD peer support network before I even knew what that meant.
Wow. That's awesome.
Right. But mind you, I'm 25 when this happens. I've got 2 small children and I'm in an abusive marriage. So I'm doing all of this, but not understanding what I'm doing. And now I have people calling me, telling me their story, and I'm being very compassionate and listening, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And then I'm on Yahoo chat rooms trying to find other people so they don't feel alone too. But I'm getting bombarded by old men telling me that I'm the worst thing to ever happen to the Canadian military and a black mark on Canadian history and all of this stuff that totally took away from what I did and made me feel bad for doing what I did. It took till like 5 years ago to get the pride back
That's fucking brutal.
for putting my face on that magazine.
That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, if you're any one of those people, feel free to drop me a line. I would love the opportunity to talk with you about how a 19/20-year-old woman who's joining the military and is sexually assaulted and then charged did not cause a problem to the military. It was the people who did that and then the people who charged her thereafter. It had nothing to do with you, Don. That's for sure. And you know that.
Oh, I know I can't be the problem because 20,000 plus people signed up for the sexual misconduct lawsuit, class action lawsuit. So if I was the problem, well, then there's 20,000 other plus problems too.
Yep, exactly. Good for you. I love it.
I said, it's a problem that we want to be treated properly.
That's not asking anything. I mean, that's basic human rights. You just want to be treated properly.
When I joined, I expected some harassment. Like I expected some guys grabbing my butt or like brushing against my boobs or whatever, but I never expected to be assaulted and then turned around and charged for it.
I can't get my mind around it still. Like, I'm so glad that we're not recording this on video, Don, because I'm getting close right now to being concussed from shaking my head back and forth so much. I'm just like, what the fuck? This is ridiculous.
You know, I look at it though, and I have to honestly say that if I did not join the military and have all of that stuff happen to me, I would not be who I am today. And, you know, most days I'm pretty badass. But I do have my days where like I just sit here and cry all day because I don't understand the world. And then I realize I'm not meant to understand the world. I'm only meant to understand me. And that the better I get, the better anyone that comes into contact with me will get. It's like osmosis.
Wow. That's awesome. That's deep.
I'm not being egotistical in that. It's like when someone is healed, just their presence, they provide a safe space that allows others to be able to open up to begin their healing journey. I'm honored that so many people can tell me their story and feel safe enough. I just had to learn to not hold on to all of those stories because I was holding on to them, feeling so much guilt.
Yeah.
But that guilt isn't mine and their stories aren't mine. They just feel I'm safe enough to share with. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. I agree. And no, you are not in any way, shape, or form coming off as egotistical in the least. No.
You know, it's just sometimes though, like your attitude is everything, but there is a lot of toxic positivity out there where like good vibes only. Well, what if that person's having a really bad day and not capable of a good vibe and you just like actually triggered them even more because they actually wish they could have a good vibe right now? We're so far from letting people feel what they need to feel and that feeling's okay. You know, I didn't realize I was allowed to be angry. I'm a woman. I'm not allowed to show those kind of emotions. If I throw a plate and break it, like I'm psycho. But the thing is that I didn't know there was righteous anger and that the anger within me, I'm allowed to have it. And the fact that I don't do a lot of the things that I wish I could defines me as a good human being.
Yep.
Because there are times that, yes, I wish I could hurt the people that hurt me the way that they've hurt me.
Yep.
But that would be wrong.
Yep.
Because that would just be me being them.
Yep.
And that whole hurt people, heal people is so true.
Yeah. I mean, I agree it is, but I also think hurt people can help hurt people. It's just not that we always hurt people. Yeah.
Yes, it's your matter of looking at it too. Like I find some people can look at a hurt person and understand them and understand their hurt. And other people can't. They just see a bad person. Yeah.
Or like to go right back to what you spoke about in terms of the whole good vibes. They just, these are the people that are like, well, just be happy then. Oh, okay. Well, that's a good idea. Well, just stop being sad. Fuck me. Wow. I didn't know it was that easy.
Yeah, it's just that if you don't feel those feelings, like I've learned, if you suppress any of those feelings, your anger, your sadness, your guilt, your shame, all you're going to do is project them on someone else.
Oh, yeah, they're coming back.
So if you don't actually feel them,
Yep.
then you're going to project them.
There you go.
So we can't bottle it up. If I need to cry, if anybody needs to cry, just let it out and then go move on. It needs to happen.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you had spoke in terms of like a stereotyping with regards to females that not allowed to realize anger. And that's the same thing I think with men who are struggling that feel that they're not allowed to cry. You can be angry. You can cry. Your gender really doesn't make any difference with regards to these emotions and these feelings from experiencing trauma. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Don, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about life that extends beyond the Maclean's magazine and what happens thereafter.
This episode of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is brought to you thanks to the support and financial sponsorship of Cracked Armor. Go to crackedarmor.com, read the story, buy the gear, wear it, to send a message to others who are struggling that they're not alone.
Also, check out Willow Tree Farm, care of Jason Subkowicz, another member who is struggling with PTSD and who frequently updates his Instagram to share his story. You can follow him at jason.subkowicz. That's jason.Sierra Oscar Bravo Kilo Oscar Whiskey India Charlie Zulu.
We are back from the break with Don McIlmoyle. We got to a point where we spoke about there were all of a sudden 20,000 other people who were like you, who stepped up with regards to the class action. Continue the journey from there, please.
About 2017 or maybe before that, I had been sent a article from one of my friends I went to basic training with. It's kind of funny, you get those girls you went to basic training with, and even though it's been 30 years, they still communicate. Might not be often, but every once in a while they pop up. And she sent me an article about the class action lawsuit. And someone in Nova Scotia had started hers. So at that time, there were 5 different lawsuits across the country. They were all for the same purpose. So those 5 lawyer companies, whatever, I can't think of the name right now.
Yeah.
They got together and they made it one big lawsuit. In 2018, I think it was Justin Trudeau was on the news and said they were going to squash the lawsuit. It happened to be on the anniversary of my assault that this happened. On my claims cover, it says right there, the date, right?
Right.
Well, this is like the same date time frame. And it's like 20 years later or something. And I'm like, oh, no, not today. You ain't doing this today. So I called every news agency I could think of. And I was like, I have to do this. I was Chex TV because I lived in Peterborough. And then CTV, they both came and interviewed me. And I said, there's benign neglect. They could have done something. They didn't even do anything until Stephanie Raymond came forward in 2014. And Maclean's did an article on our nation's disgrace. And another article was done in French because Stephanie's from Quebec. I forget what it's called. And that opened another Pandora's box because now you don't just have the 1998 stuff. You've got another young woman who has been treated horribly. And so that was when they did the Madame Justice Marie Deschamps report. And she came forward with all her recommendations and they started Operation Honor. Well, in RMC, it was known as Operation Hop on Her.
Oh, my fuck.
Right? So it was really not a very good word to choose. Then the class action lawsuit came out because enough people had just had enough. And there was a group that got together and then we got to where they had the Supreme Court. I was on the news and then Supreme Court. And I went down to Ottawa and there was 2 days of testimony and there was so many people there. On the day that I spoke, I was the first person and I think there was 32 people after me.
Wow.
And I reminded the judge that had they done something in 1998, I don't think that this many people would have gotten hurt.
You make a point. You definitely make a point.
I mean, I'm just assuming, but I'm thinking that if they had to put a stop to it, it wouldn't be where it is now.
I can't help but agree with you. 100%. Absolutely.
And we won. So then everybody had to apply. At the end date of the applications, there were 20 plus. And then I don't know how many it ended up with, because there were people that had no idea about the lawsuit. And if they could prove that they didn't know, they could still apply up to a certain point. But the lawsuit was also peanuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We got $50,000 for a life of trauma.
Yeah.
And until you figure out the grace in it and seeing that it happened for you, not to you, then you're stuck in that cycle of abuse and accepting the love you think you deserve and accepting unacceptable behavior because you're lonely. All of those things that you do when you're caught in a trauma cycle.
Right. And that's the reality here, Don, is this incident that occurs when you're a teenager, it completely changes the course of your life, right?
Yes.
Things change. I mean, you just sort of hit on it a little bit there in terms of, making decisions because you're lonely, because you're looking for something for someone and you're not necessarily making the best decisions.
Yes, I like to say bad decisions made me smart, though.
I like that. That's you, man. You've got a great attitude. You are so silver lining in the cloud. That's awesome. I love it.
The one I couldn't deal with was when people say you made your own choices. Right? Because I did have a lot of choices imposed on me. But now I'm at a stage where I can say, obviously, I made those bad decisions so I could learn something. There was a lesson in it that I have to take away. What was that lesson?
What was it?
Well, some of them were like, don't go near that person again.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
Like their toxic behavior is not my responsibility and I don't need to subject myself to it.
Truth.
It's hard when you're a people pleaser because you've been so traumatized to set those boundaries. Or, my oldest son is an addict, and to tell him I love him, but I don't like the addict and I don't want the addict around. And to have to separate him into two different people is very difficult because I love and I miss my son, but I'm not going to have him at my house robbing me.
Yeah, exactly. I hear you. I understand that. That's tough. That's difficult, though. Yeah.
And it's such a difficult split.
Absolutely. Yeah. So everything changes for you. I mean, life based on the actions of some absolutely fucking despicable individuals completely changes your life. However, as much as, and again, I love that you certainly don't want to focus on necessarily all the shit that you've been through, because you've been through a lot, Dawn. However, you're refocusing yourself in terms of who it's made you, and that being not necessarily a bad thing, maybe even a good thing.
Well, it's like I was repeating the same pattern until finally I was like, I deserve better. There was something. It's almost like I like, it's not really a joke, but I like to say when my ex-husband hit me in the side of the head with my cell phone, it woke me up like Sleeping Beauty. Like it wasn't a kiss from a prince. It was a cell phone to the side of the head. But all of a sudden I was like, there's got to be something better. There's got to be more. I don't deserve this. And I've been going through this for how many years? And now I'm at the point where like, I'd rather be alone than have people around me that are just going to treat me badly. Because even after I left my ex-husband, I still got into a couple abusive relationships because narcissists love empaths. And I had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, you're a people pleaser, right? Which, I mean, as great as that is, it also means that anyone who is certainly narcissistic, but anyone who can figure that out will all of a sudden use that to their advantage because they're a shitbag.
I had a want to be wanted and needed.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
That's tough. That's hard.
And now I realize that I just need to fulfill that myself. It's not the external validation, the love from others. I need to work on me. And I like to say I have a 5-year-old that is traumatized, but also full of awe and wonder and creativity. I have an angry 19-year-old that keeps me safe sometimes. And then I have this wise 50-year-old that is doing her best to integrate those two other parts and many others that are just misunderstood and put them all into one and use that wisdom to help other people finally integrate and grow. Because a lot of people are stuck and they don't realize. I was stuck at 19 until about 5 years ago when I finally realized that When you are traumatized, there is a developmental delay stuck in your brain, and you don't see it until you really start working on yourself. So when my kids were teenagers, I was in my heyday because in my mind, I was only 19 too, and I couldn't see what I was doing was wrong. Drinking with my boys and thinking that was fun. And now I look back and I'm horrified, but then I didn't know better. And now that I know better, I do better. But it took a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah. So let us know if you can, if you're comfortable with that, some of the work that it's taken, because I mean, I believe there's a lot of listeners. They're at different points in their journey, but some are at a point where it's time to get some work done.
One of the first things that opened my mind was I went back to university. So, I mean, I went back in 2000 and I got my nursing degree when I was 30. But then in 2012, I couldn't work in systems anymore. So I kind of took my work into more volunteering with veterans and mental health. But I went back to school in 2015 maybe, and I took Indigenous studies and I learned about nature. And I started to realize how beautiful the trees are, how beautiful flowers are and stuff. I was driving down the road and I was sad and I saw how beautiful the tree was. And all of a sudden I was happy. And I was like, wow, look at that. I acknowledge the beauty in that tree and now I feel good. And there was something with this connection to nature and just being in it. It made me feel alive again. It was something that being in the city and that I had really disconnected from it. The reconnection to nature was the number one thing that helped me see multiple perspectives. Just looking at how all trees are shaped differently, but some of them are the same kind of tree and they all get along. They don't fight. They're all different and they're all unique. It made me feel a lot like humanity. So like I equate trees to humanity sometimes. And why can't we just all get along and blow in the wind like they do?
It's true. I like that. That's a deep thought, but it's true.
Yeah. And I started to do a lot of inner child work because knowing that having a lot of trauma growing up, I had an alcoholic mother. She did quit drinking when I was 18, but those formative years. And then I'm an Irish twin. So I had a brother born 11 months after me. And in my mind, he was more important because he was a boy.
Yeah.
And this was the 70s too, right? So boys were, Andy could stay out till the same time as me because he was a boy. So even though he was a year younger. So it left me with this impression that I was not quite good enough and that my brother was the golden god. But then I started to focus on my accomplishments. And so one day I wrote down, instead of all of my traumas, I wrote down all of my accomplishments.
Wow.
And I ended up having 3 pages of them. And I was like, wow, because I even put like leaving all 3 of my marriages as an accomplishment. Because when you leave an abusive marriage, that takes great strength. You're walking into the unknown. You could stay comfortable with being uncomfortable in that relationship, or you can leave it and be comfortable with uncomfortable on your own, not experiencing that.
It's true. That's tough.
And so I put those all down as accomplishments and I ended up having 3 pages. And I had realized that I went to university with my nursing. I was a single mother with 2 little boys and I did it. I did a full 4-year program. I did not get the best grades. And because I did not get the best grades, I felt like I failed. And I told someone and they're like, you worked full time, 2 little boys, and went to school full time and still graduated and got your degree. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, holy shit, Dawn, that is huge.
It's unbelievable.
I couldn't see it as an accomplishment because my whole life was dark and I could only focus on, I graduated with 65.
Right.
I couldn't see. So I've had to kind of go back and look at all those experiences in my life that I thought were bad and that I didn't do well and re-examine them and realize that I did the best I could. And I actually did better than most people with all the trauma that I've experienced would do. My therapist says I'm a statistical anomaly. She said, technically you should be in the streets banging needles with everything you've gone through, but you got an education and you're trying to educate others.
And I think that's a fantastic turn that you just made in terms of you're trying to educate others. It's exactly where I wanted to go, Don. It's almost like we planned this, and I know we did, and this is great minds think alike is what I always say. Don, so I've seen you on YouTube. You've been doing talks to people. You're out interacting, sharing your word, your experience. Tell us about that.
It's really nerve-wracking because I've always had a public speaking fear since I was little, but you know what they say, if you fear it, you should do it.
There you go. Yeah.
So I think it was about 3 years ago, I'd been doing some little veteran functions where you told your story, and it kind of got me comfortable. In Indigenous studies, we had to do these video documentaries, and it got me talking about things just even if it was just nature or water. So I had this little background, right? And I signed up to do this Fearless Woman Summit, and I thought, I'm going to go do it in Ottawa. So I did. And I did my little talk for the very first time. I was so nervous. But after I did it, this lady came up to me and she grabbed me and hugged me, and she was just bawling her eyes out. And she couldn't stop crying. So I just held her and you pat their back, right? And this other lady brought her over Kleenex, and she said, I've been a shut-in for the last year. This is the first thing I chose to come to. And you just stood up there on that stage and you said that you were a shut-in for 4 years, but now you're here on a stage. You just gave me so much hope. I know I wanted to cry because I didn't know what to do, right? And I realized that there's always one person in the room that resonates with what you say. And you don't have to change everyone in the room. The last speech I did, I think there was I get bombarded, and because of my PTSD, I almost wish I had a publicist that could just take them and say one at a time.
Yeah.
It's not that it's only a speech, but it's very overwhelming for me after.
Yeah.
And these people come up and they want to share their stories or what they think. But when I did the other one in Ottawa, there was a girl speaking that day that had seen me in the audience, and now she was doing her speech. So I realized that just by doing what I'm doing, other people are opening up, and all I lead by example, right? So that's all I want to do is be the best me so that I can be an example and lead by example.
You've been doing that. Yeah, you've been doing that.
And when I do my speeches, because I talk about my brother, I talk about the military, and I talk about my abusive marriages, there's something for everyone in the audience sometimes. And I've got told that when I do those speeches, I'm not just up there this is my book and my 5 steps or whatever. I'm real. And I make those people feel I can see people in the audience starting to cry. And then all of a sudden I tell a little joke, and then they're all laughing. And my energy plays on that too. And it's beautiful.
It is.
It's empowering to there's this whole empowered women, empower women. Why not empowered people, empower people? And that's the stage I'd like to see people get to, because once you realize that it all comes from within, that validation, that love, that faith, everything we got taught was outside us. I never got taught to love myself or believe in myself and have faith in myself or any of that, or accept myself. I was so worried about everybody else's opinion, what everybody else believed about me, that I couldn't get out of those loops and cycles. And until I said, wait a second, what I think matters, then things started to change.
I mean, you've got some amazing things here. I'm just going to recap for everybody in terms of what you can potentially look at working on that has really resonated, I guess, for lack of a better term, with you, Don, is refocusing. Look back on yourself and refocus. Pay more attention, not to the bad things, but to your accomplishments. And your accomplishments can be inclusive of getting out of bad things, bad relationships, bad workplace environments, whatever. But that is an accomplishment. Pay attention to those accomplishments. It's huge. And all of a sudden you realize, Jesus, I've done some things. You also need to start being okay with yourself and not needing other people necessarily to be okay with you. You can like yourself. Don't like yourself because someone else does. Don't think that you're beautiful on the inside or outside because somebody else does. You are. Period. I don't care how different we are. You still are beautiful on the inside and beautiful on the outside. And you need to refocus that and get out of your own way. And then actually reaching out and speaking to others who are struggling and being there to share your experience so that other people who are struggling with finding the words, struggling with the experience, struggling, period, can make that bond that's needed so they know they're not alone. So they know there are others who are going through similar things that they are. And it changes. It really changes your viewpoint. I mean, Don, you've done amazing things basically with your reassessment of your entire past and things that were done to you, done by you, done whatever. I'm speechless, Don, as to how you've really taken a lot of pain and rejigged it to do some positive things out of it.
Well, my whole life, people said that I was trouble. But I would like to reframe it and say, I wish they could see I wasn't trouble. I was troubled. My anger that's come out in the past at people is not really anger. It's frustration from having to fight this fight for so long. And it's only recently been acknowledged, rightfully so, that someone who's been trying to get a point across for so long, it's the way I like to see it. If someone's acting inappropriately, there's something wrong with them. People don't just get angry or act out of alignment without something being wrong. So, if you've got that person screaming and yelling at you, yeah, what they're doing's wrong. I don't condone what they're doing, but try to understand that person wouldn't be doing that if something wasn't wrong. Because normal people on a regular basic day are generally just on the same wavelength. So if someone's off that wavelength, something's happened. And I think we need more acknowledgement of that, not just looking oh, look at that chick, she's crazy, she's just yelling or whatever. Be like, why is she yelling? I wonder what happened.
Well, it's like these talks too, Donna. These kill me when, it's like, oh my God, you find out another first responder or a military vet has committed suicide. And then it seems, I don't know if it's a coping mechanism, but then you hear things like, well, he kind of had some issues. Well, what were his issues? Well, I mean, he was drinking a lot. He was missing work. He was going through his second divorce. And those issues are because he's fucking struggling with mental health. Not that he's a complete train wreck. He didn't commit suicide because of one of those things. It's because of his overall struggle that's been missed for, well, however long. Or it's been an inability for people to actually know how to deal with this or know how to speak to this or know how to help them.
Or acknowledge that something's even wrong.
Right.
There's a lot of people out there that just keep going and won't even acknowledge that there's something wrong with them.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if that's because they think that PTSD is like an airborne kind of a disease that you can catch, or if it's just still people are so uncomfortable talking about mental health issues, which blows my mind because nowadays, Don, I mean, I'm 50 as well. So nowadays, people will talk about a lot of physical things that they wouldn't back in the day. I mean, let's be honest, just in terms of what goes on in the brain, what goes on in the body, I don't know, all kinds of shit. People talk about it now. It seems to be very, very open. But mental health still seems to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, because mental health means that you have to look at yourself, the ME in it, right? Me.
I like that.
And not many people want to look in the mirror and say, I'm the problem. What can I do to fix it? They want to blame it on everyone else or the systems or the government or whatever, when the only control you really have is over yourself. So why not start, looking at yourself? Why do I do this? What don't I like about myself? What do I want to change? What do I like about myself? Ask yourself those questions. Who am I without all the labels? I look at who's Dawn if she wasn't a nurse, a mother, a veteran, an advocate. Am I happy with just me if I didn't have any of those labels? Yeah, I actually am.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't need to live with the labels. I mean, that's unfortunately the reality a lot of people seem to really live by is, again, how they can put things into silos and be able to say, well, you know, I'm a firefighter and I'm a dad and I'm an organ donor. I mean, those are all fantastic things. Don't get me wrong, but you're more than that. You're bigger than that.
I know I'm not my trauma. I'm all of the things I've done to overcome it. Me.
I like that.
You know, I got told when I was on that Maclean's cover, that's all I'd ever be, is a victim. Well, I'm pretty sure that I've showed them that I can overcome obstacles. I'm adaptable. I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter.
You are a fighter.
I'm a lover and a fighter.
You are a fighter. You are. There you go. I love it. I'm a lover and a fighter. Yes. Yes. Don, I mean, I could spend hours and hours talking with you because I know we've just barely scratched the surface. And at some point, it would be great to talk again and maybe get deeper into it if you would be up for it. I'm so genuinely appreciative for your time today. This is something we've been talking about for a little while. I have a great deal of, well, beyond respect for you. I think you are an awesome person. And I just am really appreciative for all that you've done for so many other people, so many other females in the military and males in the military. You've done so much for just people. And I'm so appreciative for that. Before we end off, Don, is there anything that you would like to add? Anything you'd like to say? This is your time. The floor is open.
I just want to say I'm very grateful for this opportunity, Larry. And, you know, be the change you want to see. That's the thing. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's an old saying, but it is so true. So if you can look at your life with a different perspective, different eyes, kind of, be the client and the therapist, then you're going to make a difference. And I'm just so grateful that you're doing this to open up the waves for people to understand that it's okay to have a mental illness. It's okay to have PTSD. It's okay to feel. That's what we were meant to do.
Well, not surprising you put a perfect ending to it, Don. And I just will say on a closing note for everybody, I mean, this is an episode, and I encourage you to go back and listen to it. And not just once. Go back and listen to it a few times to pick up the message. This is an episode where Don spoke briefly about the traumas, but wanted to certainly spend much more time talking about how she is not defined by her trauma. She is defined by what she has overcome and who she's become as a result. That is an absolutely amazing message and takeaway. And this is an episode that I know I'll be listening to a few times. There's a lot of fantastic things dropped in this one, Don, and I sincerely appreciate it. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have more.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all